Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Cartel Hour, where we do live tastings and discussions of all kinds of spirits with the people who make them, use them, and enjoy them. My name is Cameron Stevens.
And my name is Seth Benheim. Together, we're covering everything from familiar bottles to rare and exclusive releases from near and far away. If it's distilled, it's on the podcast.
Featured in Rolling Stone, GQ, Men's Journal, and more, we bring celebrity guests, master distillers, and industry veterans to chat about the latest in the spirits world. Raj Bhakta sometimes comes off as a larger-than-life character. He had a stint on The Apprentice, and he did buy an entire college after all. As the founder of Whistlepig, he got a chance to take a neglected stash of liquid and create an entire brand. He's now taking that same playbook and applying it to Armagnac with Bhakta Brandy, with the same kind of Wild West spirit of leading boldly into uncharted territory. We got a chance to chat with Raj about this historic liquid which has up to 150-year-old juice, and the story it has to tell as well. We're here to learn a little bit and drink a little bit. So grab a glass and let's enjoy. Welcome back to the Infusory, everyone, for another episode for the Cartel Hour. My name is Cameron Stevens.
And my name is Seth Benheim. And today we have Mr. Raj Bhakta of Bhakta Brandy, Bhakta Armagnac, however you'd like to say it. We are going to be drinking it and talking all about the Armagnac and about Raj.
Your journey to get to this point, too, because it's definitely a storied journey as well. But Raj, how you doing, man?
I've got a whole book on it.
Great, Cameron. Great to be here with you both, you and Seth. Let's get to it.
Fantastic. Well, Seth, where do you want to start? What's your big burning question?
Well, I got an email a couple weeks ago, and it said the Elon Musk of spirits, and that was the subject line. And you know, I opened most emails, and I opened that one. I opened that one really quickly. I said, "Okay, who is the Elon Musk of spirits?" And here we are.
Apparently that's you, Raj.
A few weeks later,
hey, baby, that's me. I'm moving to Texas.
Exactly.
The high taxes and regulation in Vermont.
Yep. There you go. So here we are.
I guess my question is, are there any similarities between you and Elon?
I think, I think, it sounds like my promoter has said that. I, of course, am far too modest, to make any such comparison. Given I'm so modest, I put my name on the bottle, right?
Yeah, it's about time.
It's not the Musk they're driving around.
This is true.
No. So I think so. I mean, I think both. He definitely Musk is a disruptor, and to use that overused term, in technology. And I've definitely driven some innovations in spirits, starting with basically bringing rye whiskey back to America, and now Armagnac. I guess he's smarter, but spirits is also interesting, and I've got a lot of core competency and expertise in it, and I have a great love of bringing back underappreciated spirits, and that takes time and attention, and you have to get a lot of attention. I mean, you have to make a lot of noise to basically raise the dead.
To stand out. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me. I mean, I'm sure that you've talked extensively about Whistlepig, and this is not a focus on Whistlepig by any means. But to me, if we were thinking about your quote unquote origin story, it seems like at least that's the one that the press, says, hey, this is kind of where Raj got his start. So touching on that to get to here, maybe is there any way that you can tell some stories about that founding leading you to where we are at today with this Armagnac?
Yeah, sure, Cameron. I think that basically the discovery that led me to create Whistlepig was that of an old stash of rye whiskey in Canada. And that was courtesy of my old master distiller, the late Dave Pickerel. And I believed, but beforehand, it wasn't completely happenstantial that I found rye and started Whistlepig and used that rye stash to get it going. It was I looked at the trends of what was going on in the whiskey business as a whiskey drinker, and so bourbon had been booming for a number of years. I had conducted a very thorough and extensive, hazarding my liver, my reputation, all sorts of things, a thorough due diligence of all things whiskey related, and realized that rye was the most flavorful. Now, that was 2010. In 2020, moving into 2021, I think whiskey is, I don't want to say played out as a category. I'm a whiskey drinker. I still love whiskey, but whiskey is, not new. A lot of people who have been drinking whiskey have tried every single one. And I frankly think a lot of whiskey drinkers are getting bent over a barrel in terms of what they're having to pay for and what they're getting for it. Now enter Armagnac, where I'm able to offer in Bhakta 50 a 50-year age statement. Now, I think
minimum, I believe, correct?
And that's exactly so.
The youngest.
The youngest juice is 50 years old. The oldest juice is 152 years old. Now that's unheard of stuff. That's unheard of stuff.
I almost questioned it. Like, was it drinkable on its own? I know you've blended, and I just want to. I've got a little card here to announce that the vintage we're about to try today includes Armagnac from 1868, 1897, 1939, 1946, 1956, 63, 65, and 1970. All of those dates, in case you were wondering, are before Cameron and I were born.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Me too, actually. Me too. Now you made me feel young, Seth.
There you go.
That's what we try to do with this podcast.
That's why I started the show.
Just turned 45, and I'm not the youngest guy. It's been a while since I was the youngest guy in the room, and I'm, dealing with middle age and all that. And you just put a little spring in my step. In addition to the lovely brandy I'm about to try, the Armagnac. And so, following up on that, I wrote, I think, quite a lovely little book. And in there, it says the age statement in this bottle could be given not in terms of years, but of generations. The oldest grapes were harvested in 1867 and were crushed in wooden vats by the nimble feet of French children, whose grandchildren are themselves now dead and gone. Let that sink in for a moment. Now let us imagine their world. The planet was dominated by European kings and emperors, whose forefathers had long ago ascended the greasy pole of power. I mean, Napoleon III was emperor of France. Abraham Lincoln had just died. The Civil War, just ended.
Wow.
Queen Victoria was in the middle of her reign. You have in there 39, World War II breaks out. And to me, what Bhakta is about, I love history. And it's an ability to go back and taste, ages past. And, I know how it sounds, but I feel you can really taste the ghost, the spirits, the spirit of the people who made it in the age. And that's an experience that nothing else in the world offers. No other brand in the world offers. And that's really why I put my name on the bottle.
Yeah. Now, this sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, a little like the origins of Whistlepig in that you found some stocks of barrels, but that's pretty much how you arrived at this venture now with Bhakta, is your love of alcohol, your desire to do something new and exciting, that your love of history, and also your ability to find these old casks and bring them together, blend them, and actually, we'll get into a second, finish them in Islay Scotch barrels and put that all together. Is that about right? That culmination?
No, that's well said. I would add one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
I love bringing and finding great value to the consumer. I love when I purchase something well. I love getting value, and I love offering that to the consumer. And I feel like this is one of those cases where, we started at $250 a bottle this summer. It's now, probably $350 a bottle right now, and it'll be going up, but still, I think by far the greatest value in the entire world of spirits. For a 20-year-old whiskey, you're spending well more money. Brandy costs more to make. This is aged longer. And I will argue, as you'll hear, that I think brandy is in and of itself a more elegant and superior base that is fruit. Fruit-based spirit is superior to grain-based spirit. And I'll put it to you this way. All really spirits are an acquired taste. Very few people, I've never met the person. I don't know if you guys, will be any exception, but the first person who ever took a glass of whiskey didn't taste it and say, my God, that's great, right?
Fair enough.
It's an acquired taste, right? Because we anyway, we'll leave it at that. It's an acquired taste. The good things follow generally. But we can acquire the taste for the best stuff. And I think that here's an opportunity, for us to reset our taste buds and develop an acquired taste for something that is inherently superior, which is brandy. You look at production cost, you look at, use your intuitive, visceral gut reaction. I come up with a bundle of grape and I got a bundle of grain or a handful of grain.
What costs more?
Yeah.
What costs more? Which one do you want to eat? What does the human monkey want, right? You don't want to give me the bunch of that cornmeal. You don't want to eat that, do you? Oh, I want to eat a bunch of cornmeal or a bunch of rye grain or a bunch of wheat, seeds. No, you want to eat the nice peach. You want to eat the grapes. You want to eat the nice fresh stuff off the thing because deep inside that this is much better stuff to eat.
Well, you think about my wife won't even buy the dog food that has grains in it. She wants the grain-free dog food. Won't give it to our dog. Not to say I don't drink, ungodly amounts of whiskey on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. But I've got 800 bottles to the left here that you're not seeing. We'll show you after. But it's a very valid point when you talk about cost and quality of what goes into something. And again, brandy is superior in the sense that it is much older. People were drinking brandy vine spirits, way outdate grain spirits.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear from, because I'm sure in this journey you either knew already or had learned a lot more about the history of brandy and the history of Armagnac specifically. So would love to hear, what you think of when you describe the spirit and its history.
Yeah. So the history, Armagnac is France's oldest spirit. It predates cognac by a long shot. Mm-hmm. There was an abbot of the church, and there was only one church at that point. The Protestant Reformation hadn't happened, and he wrote about it. He wrote back to the Vatican about this unique spirit that he found in this region of France. This is 1300. And this area of France had been, grapes had been introduced, vineyard winemaking had been introduced by the Romans, some probably when Julius Caesar conquered Gaul, before Christ. And all of that is to say this is a very, very ancient spirit. And, it goes back in terms of when it was recognized as a region and Armagnac as a appellation began formally was, in the late 1880s, 1870s, 1890s, somewhere in that range. When France really started designating and protecting Bordeaux wines and Champagne as a region and cognac in a region, Armagnac was among those. So it is really, and it is the oldest spirit, again, in France. And what makes it age better, why does, and you guys probably know this, you don't want to drink a 50-year-old bourbon, right? Because bourbon ages much faster or ages relatively quickly. A bourbon's perfectly good at 5 years old. A bourbon is, I think it's terrific at 10, and it's probably beginning to head downhill at 15. Why? Because it goes into new oak, right? And that's like the tea bag effect, right? The first time you use a barrel, it's like a fresh tea bag. It's got the most flavor to impart. It's giving its virginity to the whiskey in this case. And after that, no more virginity. Bottom line, it has less and less flavor as it goes as that barrel gets used. Bourbon has to be new, all right?
By law.
By law, correct. It has to be a new barrel, and it sits in Kentucky. And in Kentucky, it gets hot and cold, and hot and cold, and hot and cold, continental climate. So you have, on top of a new barrel, you have a lot of expansion, contraction, and that speeds up the aging process. All right, so you have a quickly aged product, which is good if you want to get a good tasting product out fast. And generally speaking, from a business standpoint, that's wonderful. All right, but there's no replacing the true hierarchy, the empress forever of the greatest spirits in the world will always be age, because it's deep in the human psyche. If I put something that's 10 years old in front of you, I put something 20 years in front of you, I put something 50 years in front of you, which one do you want to taste?
All of them, but I'm
True.
different. In that order. No, but again, I think there's whether it's marketing or psyche or whatnot. One of the questions you bring up, the barrels and the effects and all these things, angels share, you have a loss of alcohol by volume year after year, whether it's in Scotland, whether it's in Kentucky. I have to assume that potentially, unless I don't know quite how this works. I really don't know nearly as much about brandy or Armagnac as I do about, say, Kentucky or bourbon or rye or other American spirits, which are really my forte. Was this vatted? Was it in barrels? Was it stored in a way that it had no angel share over the 152-year course before bottling? How does that work? How did that play out?
Yeah. So generally, very good question, Seth. So normally what happens in Armagnac is, first of all, it doesn't sit in a new oak the entire time.
Yep.
Number two, it goes into a much larger, that's the other thing. The smaller the barrel, the faster the aging.
Of course.
This goes into a 200-gallon barrel. This is my master blender just walked in.
Oh, awesome.
Hey.
And who also doubles as chief counsel. So you got a bigger barrel, generally an older barrel, and it sits in sort of these underground shays. So that temperature that I was talking about before, the temperature is stabilized. All of those things reduce, and the humidity is not very high. Oddly enough, when the humidity is high, you have more angels, which is counterintuitive. You'd imagine if it's dry outside, you'd think you'd lose more.
I've aged spirits in barrel in Nevada, in Vegas, and it's dry and hot versus somewhere that's cool, slightly humid or seaside or something like that. The terroir of where you are, above ground, below ground.
Yeah.
What's one of the distilleries in Kentucky? I believe, I think it's Maker's Mark. Might be Four Roses. They do like one story only. Like they don't go 4 or 5 floors because there's a whole theory about not going too high because heat, rise. All that stuff plays into it. So underground,
big difference. Big differences. And sometimes you just get big differences in barrels. But to answer your question, Armagnac generally sits in the barrel between 40, if you're going for long-term aging, between 40 and 70 years. All right. Then you put it into bigger vats. So you constantly move it into, let's say it spends 30 years, you rebarrel it once. You put it in an older barrel because you don't want it to pick up too much wood. You want it to continue aging, but you want to slow it down. So you'll generally in Armagnac rebarrel it around, you might rebarrel it several times, but you rebarrel a couple of times and you keep it in wood of increasing size until you're putting it into like really big, several 100-gallon vats. Okay. And then after a while you say, okay, this doesn't need anything more. It's reached perfection. You take it out and you put it in what they call a bonbon, which is basically a demijohn is another word for it, but it's glass. You put it into glass, and then that really, really slows the aging down. And at that point, you know, you do have some changes in flavor, but you pretty much, the wood impartation stops. You do have some mellowing frequently of the flavor profile, and that normally happens by 70 years. So for example, the 1868 that's in there, the 1868 has been in glass for probably, you know, at least 70 or 80 years, maybe
Wow.
a little bit less, but it's still 1868, right?
Yeah.
And are these sealed glass containers, or does it?
So, yeah, they
Yeah.
put like that. It's like
You'd
a
lose
I would
ABV
imagine,
if
yeah.
you open it up. And the question I have also, but then I want to drink. I took a sniff for those not watching and those on the Spotify and podcast. I did sniff it already, and it smells pretty good. The next piece here is what happens. What happens with Bhakta when you run out of the 68? And I'm saying 1868, the 1890s, because I could say 97. You're like, oh my God, 1990s. No, 1897. Some of those World War II vattings, or what's the term for the glass again? I'm sorry.
The bonbons.
The bonbons. So when you lose the World War II bonbon, when you use all of this, I mean, do you have enough to make enough as you are projecting, or will you run out and need to get? Are we going to see a 40-year-old Bhakta or a 30-year-old Bhakta as you event? You know, there's not an unlimited supply of 1868.
Yeah, so then it will be gone. And this is why I say this. This may sound self-serving. It's actually not, because I want to put as many bottles into as many hands as possible, but people should buy two. You should buy. You know, a friend of mine actually in LA told me this sometimes: one to stock and one to rock. Buy one as an investment, and buy one to drink, because the price of this bottle, the 50 with those blends in it, is going to go up to a couple $1,000s a bottle. And if you have one of the first 38 barrels, which is how we're releasing it, I don't know what barrel you have there. Actually, it would be good for me to know if you could write.
We have the.
It just says barrel used.
No, it's barrel 5. It's Percival.
Yeah. Percival, yeah.
Percival.
That was the first one that came out of France. So that's it's a little bit more. I like 5 quite a bit. It's gone, and that's why, I mean, this is and here's what I say, like, I scoured the world. I went with a pocket full of money, right, and traveled every square inch of the spirits landscape globally, and there is nothing close to Armagnac. You know, it was jaw-dropping. You walk into these old cellars, you know, these almost like caves, but ancient, you know, cellars, and they have these spirits that go back. And the one that I found, there was a guy who was, you know, oddball guy. Maybe he was a little inbred from keeping it in the family for a long time, all these riches. But you know, it was like out of a storybook. You know, like all these different years that 1868, 1897, 1878, the beginning of the 19th century. I mean, there's nothing else like this in the spirits world, which is why I feel so strongly that this is a great investment bottle, because look, in 100 years, it's all gone. I mean, all you need is the Chinese to start, and they are picking up on it. They didn't even a little bit of taste like this, and they'll wipe it out like they did the rhinos.
Yep. Now,
wait, so are you saying you found all of these barrels from one person?
The oldest
or
stocks,
one place.
The oldest stocks that I got was a guy. My wife, basically, I was traveling in France. My wife throws me out of the house. I drive across France, and I go into the town of Condom. No kidding, which is where my chateau is. a family who had been curating and buying these barrels since the 1890s. All right, had been buying the best vintages. Was having some health issues, and he wanted to sell his chateau. And well, he wanted to sell his brandy, and you had to take the chateau with it. So I didn't really want the chateau; I wanted the brandy, but I got the chateau with it. It sounds really cool until you pay the heating bill. And that's how we picked this up. But his family were basically they were hoarders, thank God. And they had all this stuff.
That's so interesting to me because like one of my questions was inevitably going to be like, how did you find this, what seems to me like this treasure trove find? And you've explained that story a little bit just now, but what I'm kind of curious about as well is because I'm thinking big picture, you've gone on this journey and you're going around and looking for spirits in different places. I mean, I'm assuming this guy didn't just have an email address that you could just, type in and say, hey, you got any old brandy for sale? Like, how do you find these people,
So there was Armagnac is a very, okay, to give you an idea, I don't think I'm joking. I don't think I'm exaggerating, rather. I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think it might actually be accurate that as much Jack Daniels is either spilt or broken in any given day at bars or in transportation, right, is the entire stock of all Armagnac, right? It's actually a tiny category. And it's very, very old-fashioned. So they still make this, Cameron. They make this stuff in like wood-burning stills today. Huh? In 2020, you can go right now, 2020, and there'll be wood-burning stills on the countryside where they're taking their wine, the farmers, and they're turning it into, an eau de vie, a spirit, a brandy, okay? Come on. This is like stuff out of the storybooks. We talk about craft in America. I mean, we talk about craft, right? That means that you bought some grain, you bought a small still, right? And you put it in your garage or something, and now I'm a craft guy.
The
right?
American Craft Spirits Association defines craft as anyone that doesn't sell 750,000 9-liter cases or more.
Yeah, what a bunch of bullshit.
So craft is, if you sell 749,000 9-liter cases.
Yeah.
Well, it's such an interesting point that you have, Raj, which is the fact that it's defined by volume and not necessarily by
ownership. An ownership. They say if you're not owned by a corporate or publicly traded company, or a company that also does more than that volume, then you are considered craft.
Got it. But what's interesting here is that the techniques, right? And so I think the techniques are, sure, the volume obviously makes it craft, but the techniques are to a certain point ancient,
Oh yeah.
Ancient. Yeah, this distillation, the alembic distillation technology that's used was actually brought to this region of France by the Arabs, because they conquered that part of France and Spain. I mean, that's probably 1200 that it got brought to it. And, apparently the Arabs at that point, they had good distillation technology. They didn't drink, but they knew how to distill. Or they weren't supposed to be drinking, I guess. But yeah, I mean, this is what, Cameron, you brought up. When I went there, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe that I was like, and I'm more than a decade into the spirits business. I started America's most valuable, whiskey company. I've been around the block. I've seen the distilleries in Scotland, and, I've traveled the Caribbean for rum. I've done, the whole thing, the whole planet, literally. And when I saw this, I couldn't believe it. It's like everything, it was storybook. It was castles with in this particular case, with ancient spirits going back, and farmers with, their French berets, stoking wood into stills that I couldn't believe it. And how is this not, known? How had this not blown up? That's what blew me away. And apparently it's just an accident of history. This is a rich region of France. It's an insular region of France. They had plenty of food. I guess they didn't like outsiders too much. They didn't like leaving, and if you'd be there, you would understand it's gorgeous. And unlike the Bordeaux's, and unlike unlike cognac, unlike champagne, this area never got exposed. And I guess the secret's over. I guess I'm going to screw it up.
Well, that's the question that's kind of coming to me now. Is you've traveled, you've looked at rum distilleries, you've done the whiskey thing, American whiskey. I'm sure you've explored international whiskeys and been to other countries and visited. Maybe you've been to Asian whiskey.
Yeah, I did. I looked big time into Indian whiskey. And
you've probably crossed all these different opportunities and or areas that maybe you felt were lacking in representation and such. Armagnac seems to. I'm in the industry. I'm on the last quarter of my first decade in the business, and Armagnac seems hard. It seems hard in the sense that brandy's hard, cognac's even more refined, and Armagnac is even more refined than that. And I think the categories, or at least the volumes, get smaller and smaller, both from availability and also from consumption standpoint. Brandy being the biggest overall category, cognac, then Armagnac being even smaller than brandy. I believe. I could be wrong about that, but I
no. I think cognac is I think like 100.
It's like Hennessy. You think Hennessy and you go, oh, okay, cognac.
90 times bigger than Armagnac as a category. I mean, literally.
Exactly. So the question kind of is, who is the audience?
I think my customer is the whiskey drinker who, is looking for something different, who's getting, who's tried, this one and that one. Anybody who's even thought of buying a bottle of Pappy, right? I mean,
yep.
Like, as long as you're not buying it for, Frank, I don't
$700, $800 for a 10-year-old product.
Bullshit.
12-year-old product.
That liberate yourself from that. First of all, get something real, for your money. Good for the owners, right? Good for them. I respect.
Good for the liquor store owners. They're making a killing, I'm sure.
The liquor store owners, the liquor brand owners, good for them. But for the consumer,
no way.
Getting bent over the barrel, no Vaseline, bam, bam, bam. That's what's happening. And this is basically for the high-end whiskey drinker to open up a totally new category, superior in every way, superior in the spirit, superior in its age, superior in that it's being, look, everybody gets a kick out of something. I sold Whistlepig for a fortune. I enjoy bringing new and forgotten things to the consumer. And this is the ultimate discovery in the spirits world, because this is like mezcal. People discovered mezcal, but it's new stuff, right? So it's like 2-year-old stuff, smoky, and it's got all the craft of mezcal, except it's like, elegant Frenchman, relatively elegant Frenchman instead of the Mexican peasant making it. The God bless them both. But this is aged, 50, 60, 70, 80, times longer. And it goes back into World War II, World War I, back to the Civil War, basically. And you can taste all that. So basically, it's people with their eyes open who are interested in something new, who are looking for value, and who don't want to be bent over a barrel and, abused.
Bent over a 150-year-old barrel.
There you go. Well, I'd like to try some of this, kind of finally. And we've discussed a little bit in terms of the age of what is in here in particular, but there's also some finishing happening as well.
Yeah.
And so in your own words, Raj, I'd love for you to tell us what is in here and why you've done what you've done to create this specific blend.
Okay. So this is made by and for a whiskey drinker. And that explains the finishing. So when you go into this, as you get on the nose, you get the smoke on the nose. No?
Yep. Light. Yeah.
Light smoke, right? So this, I was traveling through the countryside, and I ran into a farmer who had a barrel or had some Armagnac that he put into a peated Scotch cask. And when I tasted it, I was like, eureka. This combined the sweetness of the brandy with some of the spice and brine and smoky nose that would build a bridge for me and for the whiskey drinker into the new promised land, which is Armagnac.
So here's a question, and it's not a comment of any kind of mine, and you just explained really what stood out to you when tasting that barrel. Isla is, for those listening that don't know, and Isla, you know, I know I work with Scotsmen, and they say Isla. It's peat, it's smoke. If you haven't heard our episode on peated Scotch, go to go to Cartel Hour, check out episode number 3. This is the smoky Scotch where the malted barley is actually germinating, and they stop the germination by drying it out by actually using smoke from burning chunks of the ground from the bogs of Scotland. Yeah.
Right.
That bellow smoke and that's in the grain fermentation element of Scotch. Then they distill that, and that smoke carries through the column or pot stills over into the whiskey, and it's not any kind of a barrel effect that is making it smoky. It's not the char or anything like that. It is the actual grains that are making the barrels smoky. So when Raj is saying he's putting Armagnac into a smoky barrel, that barrel's been affected by the previous tenant, the whiskey, not any kind of a smoky barrel that he's
not
selected.
During the actual distillation process.
Correct.
So all that said,
well explained
in like rapid succession. So that said, the nuance, because if you were to tell me without just tasting what I just tasted, and I'll comment on that in a moment because it's excellent. So,
yeah.
But in a second, if you were to tell me, hey, I've got 50, 100, even 150-year-old, really refined, nuanced spirit, I'm going to put it in an Isla cask. I'm like, it sounds crazy. You're going to overpower or destroy nuance. It would seem, I would think that at a glance.
Yeah, you would think it's nuts.
It sounds nuts from like 150-year-old spirit. It's probably rich with flavor and this and that. Why would you put it in a thing? But you've done that. You've done it. You've come out with that. You've launched with that. And you tasted it and you said, this is great. I'm tasting it now. It certainly is great. It's a fascinating choice. It works. It works so well. And I don't think I've never quite had a spirit like that before.
Well, you would have never get exactly as you said. I wrote this in the book. My master blender over in France is a guy named Bernard, right? This is when I told him that we were going to finish it after I had tasted this stuff in the Scotch casks. Bernard was aghast when I directed him to pour the most ancient brandies in the world into smoky Scotch barrels. He told me later, after a few drinks, that he thought it was sacrilege. He confided into me that he planned to lie, to tell me that he had done it, and to wait till I'd gone back to America. His mission was to save his army. No, this is true, right? The guy thought he was a crazy American. He turned, but it just turned that this balance, right? And I would have never, just for all the reasons that you just said, Seth, all the reasons you just said, I would have never have even thunk it. And if I just didn't happen to be sitting there, and and here's the other thing, you got to get on the road. You got to get on the road, and you got to try a lot of stuff, and you got to talk to a lot of people, and you got to listen to it with an open, mind. Because if I hadn't met that, and I hadn't been drinking a couple of Armagnacs, and I hadn't have been yucking it up with the farmer, and he hadn't have brought out his, goofy thing that he was half embarrassed by that he had actually done this, because I think he'd lost a drinking match with a guy in the Scotch business. Right, and that's how we ended up doing this. This would have never existed. And it turns out this is the coup de grace. This is just the thing that builds the bridge, rather, for the whiskey drinker into the better land of Armagnac.
Oh, absolutely.
Agreed. And so what's really interesting to me is, I mean, I was going in obviously with preconceived notions of brandy, of wine, and this is not sweet.
No.
It really isn't.
No,
It
not at all.
finishes dry and spicy.
It has all of the brandy nose with the lightest sort of smoky and mildly briny notes on the nose. When you taste it, all of that Isla effect is really pronounced. It comes through shining and balanced with the nuances of the actual brandy.
Yeah, and I think there's this lovely tannic thing that's happening that keeps it incredibly grippy on the palate throughout. And
Well-
it's what reminds me and takes me back to the base spirit, which in and of itself is grapes. And it's lovely. It's rich, but it's balanced, man, for something that old. Like that's not where I would have gone with it, but it's great.
What does brandy what does Armagnac go into the barrel at to maintain again so much proof?
Yeah, you're going into the barrel in between, let's say, on the low side, it might go in at 100 proof.
Mhm.
And on the high side, it's going in at 100, 130 max. So
Okay.
you have more flavor, right? The higher proof you go, the more you're stripping out, right? Which is like vodka. You might as it's nothing. So the lower proof, the more flavor you get. And these old stills, and it's like newer technology that can drive. I mean, when I mean newer technology, it's like 1850s. I'm talking by Armagnac standards, right?
Yeah.
This newfangled technology from the 1850s. But basically the more modern stuff was able to distill it higher. The older stuff was lower, a lower alcohol. They couldn't distill it as high. So you're between 50% alcohol, 65, 70% alcohol max. And by the way, you want to distill in the cold weather. So incidentally, we're bringing over the first that I'm aware of, the first Armagnac wood-fired alembic still. It's coming to Vermont. We're going to start distilling it. Apparently, the colder it is, the better it is for distillation. Why, I don't understand yet. My wife is a biochemist, not me. But you get the higher proof. So it goes into the barrel at that, at that lower proof. And finally, important point there, that sort of, it's rougher. Therefore, like if you taste it when it's new, the best Armagnacs and the best spirits overall for long-term aging are not the spirits that you'd want to drink, like that are going to taste the best right off the still, right? It's the stuff that's got a little, it's got some funk. Yeah, it's got
edges.
It's got some hair on it. But that's the stuff. That's the stuff. It's like a crazy young racehorse. It's kicking the stalls, mad pain in the ass. You don't want to deal with it. But if you can get that son of a bitch focused and run him down the field, that's your champion. And that's the same thing with Armagnac. You can't have a spirit needs to be very powerful, very strong, very robust to hold up to this kind of aging. Most of the time, the barrel would just roll right over this. So this takes and it's not sweet, as you say. Like brandy, people think, people have got a terrible misconception of brandy in this country. And a lot of time they add sugar to the brandy because a lot of people have bad taste. But the truth is that if you let a brandy age, especially this type of brandy, it is this. I mean, look, you guys are whiskey drinkers, right?
We are everything drinkers at this point. I mean,
yes, indeed.
This is our first Armagnac show, but we've had 3 rum episodes, 2 or 3 tequilas, a mezcal. We've covered a lot of bases. Yeah. This is a spirits show through and through. If it's distilled, it's on the podcast.
There you go.
Now, does this taste more like a whiskey to you, or more like a rum, or more like, what if
Scotch? It tastes like Scotch. It tastes like the Scotch family. I would recommend this to a Scotch drinker that is very comfortable spending the $100 to $300 to $400 range, where you'll get a really nice 12-year on the low end to a maybe even a 30-year-old max for your $300-400 price range. I would say if you if you are even curious about peat and looking for value, you cannot beat what is in this glass. I don't want to say it's only for the peat drinker. I think a lot of people, peat is polarizing. I will say that peat can be polarizing. And though this is not necessarily peated, but influenced by something that was peated, I think that
it plays adjacent to it.
It can't go without being mentioned that it is a part of what's in this glass.
Yeah.
I think if you were to completely avoid the statement that it was influenced by a peated barrel, somebody could try this, and if they don't like peat, they might not get it or get why it is the way it is. But to me, it's still extremely special for all of the things we discussed and then some. So
One of my questions is, Raj, and maybe you've been asked this before, but I have to imagine that there was some level of hurdle that you had to get over to go from Whistlepig to, it could have been, it would have been an easy route to sell Whistlepig and then do whiskey again, right? You know it. That's what you're known for. And you went in such a very different direction. And at least to my knowledge, you didn't have an extensive background with Armagnac. So did you have to learn and reinvent the process, or how did that work?
I couldn't find value in whiskey, Cameron. I couldn't find a place where look, 10 years ago, I could deliver a deeply aged, in this case, a 10-year-old rye, at $70 that I thought was, given the fact that there was really no rye out there, a good value to the consumer. Michter's at the time for a 10-year-old rye was in the, 130, 140. There was really no old rye whiskey, right? And I could deliver value there. And it was something new. And old rye really wasn't done because rye was like your drunk uncle's drink. And now all whiskey prices, you want to buy a 10-year-old bourbon or a 10-year-old rye, you're paying through the nose. There's no value, and everybody's done everything. I don't want to say you've done everything that there is to do in the whiskey world, but it's been booming for 20 years. And you got to the point in the vodka boom where I remember that they had a vodka that was out, and it was supposed to be good because it was like pressed through diamonds, and then a monk did a black backflip over it. All this BS, right? And the same thing's happening in the whiskey world, right? I mean, it's just that people are trying to come up with so many new things that they're just moving into total bullshit realm. And I just didn't think I could deliver something great and unique and interesting. I mean, and I'm pretty creative. And I fell. Look, I go into it and I write it here. I mean, this is not a joke when I say what you now possess, as I write down, is perhaps the rarest drink known to mankind. Armagnac brandy kissed by smoky Scotch casks. Over 5 generations, as empires and nations rose and fell and rose again, this brandy has slumbered. It represents an opportunity to taste ages past through a liquid whose very existence is miraculous. I can't find that anywhere else.
Yeah.
I had the money, I had the time, I had everything. I mean, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find anywhere 2% close to that, right? And then it tastes good, right? On top of all that history, it tastes great.
Yeah.
So and then I go to that, think of that piece. It's a miraculous that this survived. Okay, so France has been invaded by Germany 3 times since this stuff was distilled.
Could have burned down. The house could have fallen over. There could have been storms.
Bunch of drunken German soldiers could have just knocked the place down and drank up all the booze in the chateau, which happens.
Or bombed it to smithereens. Could have been blown up in the
It is pretty wild.
What are the chances? And then you have to think of the chances that this neurotic family happens to buy it and they can't sell any. They keep hoarding it. Thank God that they're crazy people. Because they kept on hoarding, and they had money. They were rich hoarders. What's the luck in that? A generations of rich hoarders.
There are consumers now that have taken the advice you've knowingly or unknowingly given, in that save your money, do not spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on young to middle-aged bourbon and American whiskey that is inflated in price and so on and so forth. they're migrating. One thing I have seen is they're migrating to rum. I've recently picked up a handful of the Foursquare rums that are fantastic. They're very well priced. You're getting 10, 12, 15-year-old products that have been, they're not Solera with young shit in there that they don't have to say it's in there. So you actually get, the number on the bottle is the number of age, minimum age, and so on and so forth.
No.
And so, you get
rum,
stuff, rum's great. And so
rum.
I think the consumer, if you're listening and you're one of those people that's been dabbling in rum and maybe brandy, and you've had some curiosities outside of whiskey and looking for that next thing, I think this is also a spirit for you.
I would very much agree. And it's interesting where you were going with that, Seth, because the other question that I kind of wanted to ask you, Raj, is you seem very well traveled and you've gone around the spirits industry and you've chosen this as your next play. What was the thing that took the number 2 spot? Like, if you didn't do this,
Rum.
it was rum. Okay,
Rum?
interesting. Yeah.
In fact, I bought some wonderful rum, particularly in Venezuela. I'm a big rum fan. I have some great 30-year-old rum, which sounds like it should be no good, but it got put into a vat in Canada.
I've got a 30-year rum right here.
What is it?
This is the Don Pancho 30-year-old Origins.
I don't know that.
It's Panamanian rum.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a big believer in rum. I think that there is, in whiskey, I'm playing around with the brand concept called Empire, which is a combination of all of the best whiskeys that I've collected from around the world. I bought barrels of whiskey, the Scotch, Irish, Japanese, Indian, some in France, in fact. And I think that the best whiskey in the world is a combination of all the best whiskeys in the world. But it would be if you said, listen, where do you think? I mean, if I had to bet on a category, and where do I recommend consumers to move to? Number one, Armagnac. For the well-heeled consumer, if you've got the money, right, you can afford a couple $100 a bottle. I hate to say it, but you'd be foolish not to buy a couple bottles of Bhakta Brandy if you knew about it, right? If you listened to this and you had the money in your pocket, and you didn't buy a couple bottles. And I'll end it here. And this may sound a little cocky, but I believe it 100. Well, no, it'll prove to be a fact. It'll be a fact as long as I don't drop dead, right? Too soon. And if it's like, I think even in a couple of years, I can drop dead in a couple of years because my wife is my business partner and she's very smart. And, frankly, she might do a better job with the brand than me. But anyway, here's my point. People are going to laugh or they're going to cry, the people who are in the know, when a bottle of 50-year-old Armagnac with the Bhakta name on it could be bought for $350. It'll be like, oh, you remember when a Yamazaki 18 was whatever? It's the same sort of thing. So don't cry, laugh, pick up a couple bottles. So this, to me, number one by far, Armagnac brandy, on a different level, right? Which is why I put my name on it, of opportunity for discovery and frankly appreciation. And then rum too, I love rum, but the difference is the appreciation side of rum, because rum's already such a huge category and there's a lot of it out there, it doesn't have the same like rocket trajectory potential in terms of growth rate because it's already starting from such a big base. But I love rum, and that's my number 2.
Do you want to be remembered for this product? If all the things you've done in your life were to, if someone were to rattle off the list, do you want this to be the first thing they talk about?
That I'm way too egotistical, a son of a bitch, just to be happy with me. If Donald Trump can become president, man, that's where I'm going.
And it's worth mentioning you were on his television show. You were on one of the seasons of The Apprentice, I believe.
Yeah. Yes, I was. Yes,
I have not seen the episode, but
it was. That's like he got to practice all those firings, which he's like continuing up to this day.
Well, Raj, as we wrap this up, one of the things that, first of all, we incredibly appreciate your time to come talk with us, and this to to say the story is there is an understatement. I mean, like you said, this is rich layers of history. I thought an interesting place to end might actually be sort of in that context. You're doing a new thing with the school that you're in. And to me, this is bringing something out of history into something new as well. And maybe you could talk about your world of spirits and schooling.
Yeah, thank you for that, Cameron. It's pretty simple. I ended up, it's pretty simple. That's actually sounds, it's not exactly entirely simple. I bought a college that had gone out of business in Vermont, a beautiful classic New England college called Green Mountain College. I mean, it looks like a mini Harvard, but it had gone out of business. I guess bad number of things, but anyway, to bring it back, what we're looking at doing is creating the world's premier beverage alcohol program, where people can learn, starting from the planting of grapes or grain, through the distillation process, through the branding process, which is absolutely key. Getting a brand, what is a brand, through distribution, through basic sales and marketing. Those things, and putting it into a program taught by people who've actually done something, unlike the professors at Harvard, is where we're going to go initially here. And I think that we'll graduate people who are going to be able to take advantage of this highly lucrative industry, which is worth $1 trillion nearly globally, and doesn't have a school dedicated to it. Finally, last point, and connected to sustainable agriculture, because at the end of the day, people don't realize it, but anything they drink, it starts with the earth.
Yeah,
it starts on a farm.
What's the timeline of the school? When do you expect to open? When will the first class be?
I don't want to use the whole, this virus BS as an excuse, but it has thrown a little bit of a wrench into our plans. But we're still planning on putting a program together in 2021. And hopefully we'll be making some announcement with that in the couple of months. And we'll have something ready to go by this coming fall. That'll be September 2021. And I think the idea is to graduate students with chock full of skills and ready to take advantage of a booming business.
Well, Raj, we absolutely wish you success on that front. Obviously, you've released another incredible spirit. And, me particularly, I was certainly blown away by it. And I feel the gravity of what you've done here. And I hope other people do too, as they get to try it. So
thank you, Cameron.
I learned a lot. This
Yeah.
was educational and just informative on such a level that, we don't do too many episodes of the show where we just drink one thing. We drink 9, 10, 11, 12 things in the same allotment of time. Those episodes get interesting. But
I hope you guys will have occasion to come visit in Vermont, and I appreciate your time very much. And that's a sincere invitation. Come and use a wood burning still when you're on the East Coast.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Raj. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks for coming on and sharing. Yeah.
We enjoyed this tremendously.
Take care.
All
the
right.
best.
All right.
Hello everyone, Cameron and Seth here. Just a few more things before we wrap up. First, you can always head on over to cartelhour.com for the show notes, which will include links to all the spirits mentioned and, of course, consumed on the podcast.
Absolutely. If you're interested in purchasing any of the spirits mentioned on the podcast, go ahead and click any of the links to be taken directly to those spirits, or visit caskcartel.com. They are America's largest online premium spirits marketplace and have been featured in Rolling Stones magazine, Men's Journal, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, MarketWatch, and many others.
Yeah, they are awesome and super mobile friendly too. They're a fantastic resource to search through different types of spirits, and their platform is easy and straightforward. If you don't love driving around to every single liquor store in town and hoping they have what you're looking for, Cask Cartel is certainly the best e-commerce spirits platform I've personally come across.
Couldn't agree more. And you can find them on social media at Cask Cartel, and you can find us at Cartel Hour for the podcast, where you can find information about upcoming episodes and live tastings at the Infusory.
And speaking of those live tastings, for those living in or visiting the Los Angeles area that are truly intrigued, if you want to drink along with us, we would love to have you come and enjoy an evening at the Infusory to drink through a carefully selected assortment of spirits.
We offer custom flights and have a robust library of over 700 spirits to choose from. Visit our website for more information on how to become a member of the Cartel Club.
And if you're a spirits brand that would like to be featured on the podcast, please email us or send us a direct message on Instagram.
Thank you everyone for listening, and remember to always drink responsibly
And in good company.